Welcome to Sword of Laban, a channel faithful to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Here we seek greater light and truth and have fun. Now this channel is very new right now, so if you like what you see and aren't put off by this awful sweater, then please subscribe. In part 1 I showed how it's plausible or even highly likely that the wise men who visited Jesus were Nephi the son of Helaman, Lehi his brother, and Samuel the Lamanite. Click up here for that video if you haven't already seen it, and then come right on back. Today I'll claim that the wise men saw a small new star and that it may have been in the Southern Cross. Now, this isn't some astrology mumbo-jumbo. There's some significance here in terms of timing, the function and significance of the constellation, the direction, and the shape. Let's dive in. Now, my background is physics. I studied in college, through grad school. I did some astronomy classes. I do have some basis in this. And as such, I don't much like when people use astrology, not astronomy, astrology, to try to prove something. So that's not what I'm going to do here. So let me just give you an example of what I'm not going to do. I recently watched a video by some Christian man that pinned Jesus Christ's birth on September 11th, 3 BC. And the reasoning was because of a verse in Revelation that had a virgin, the constellation Virgo, giving birth, the sun coming out of her feet, and a dragon, some scorpion made up of the constellation Libra, ready to devour it, which sat under Leho, the lion. And the lion was the symbol of Judah back in the day, while Regulus, the king of the stars, and Jupiter, the king of the planets, passed very close to each other. Anyway, there are so many things wrong with this. So the sun was in Virgo? Well, you can't see Virgo when the sun is in it, because the sky is blue. It's daytime. Yeah, you could track things and know it's in Virgo, but... And then Virgo, Libra, Leo, Regulus, Jupiter. So I'm not convinced that the constellations always represented the same stories and the same things to all cultures, including ancient Israel. And then the relative placement of the constellations, with Leo representing Judah above Virgo, that's irrelevant because they don't ever move relative to each other. So anyway, the above coincidence of celestial events, it's one of many repeated to various degrees over tens and hundreds and even thousands of years. We get these repeats, and you could pick any one of those and call that significant. So that's not what we're going to do. We're going to do something different here. So let's begin. Behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. But this was news to Herod and his wise men. They hadn't seen a star. In fact, nobody in the entire history of the planet records this star, except this short mention in the Bible from the mouths of the wise men. Oh, and, well, the Nephites clearly know of it. But for all the ancient records we have, no Chinese or Persian or any other culture has any record of any new star or even comet at this exact right time. Sure, they may have known of a star and the records were lost, but isn't it satisfying that we do have one record of a nation who knew of a new star as the sign of Christ's birth? Is it really that crazy to think that those people who knew of the star would have been the source of the wise men? Okay, so like I claimed before, the star was probably not big and bright like we see on Christmas cards. It was probably a small new star that appeared, similar to any other one, and its only significance was that it was prophesied about prior, and perhaps its location in the sky was known, so that prophets knew where to look. So why do I say that the star was small and rather ordinary? Samuel the Lamanite says in Helaman 14, 4-6, Therefore there shall be one day, and a night, and a day, as if it were one day, and there were no night, and this shall be unto you for a sign. Now notice, we haven't talked about a star yet. There's some more details, and then in verse 5, And behold, there shall a new star arise, such an one as ye never have beheld. This also shall be a sign unto you. Similarly, in 3 Nephi 1, it uses several verses to talk about the day-night day that was bright as if it were one day, but then as an afterthought, it just kind of mentions the star at the end. So the 5 verses leading up to verse 19 talk about the day-night day. Then, in verse 21, And it came to pass also that a new star did appear, according to the word. So the brightness of the sky was one sign, and the star was kind of an afterthought and another sign that doesn't appear to be connected to the brightness of the sky. The day and night and day as one day appears to be, of course, a local event manifested to the Nephites and was a sign of his birth and not visible in the old world. But the second sign, the star, was visible to the whole world, to the Nephites and to the wise men who saw it a second time at Jerusalem, and it probably has a different purpose to the first sign. Was the purpose of the second sign, the star, simply to just tell the wise men that it was time to set out? Or did it have some other purpose, like encouraging the wise men while they were mid-journey? Okay, but wait. A star such an one as ye never had beheld? Isn't that what the scripture said? Doesn't that mean it's a bright beacon in the sky? Well, no, that could mean a lot of things. It could have just been a new star somewhere. You know, for people who know the constellations well for purposes of navigation, well, they would know it when a new star popped up in the middle of one of their most important constellations. Or it could be a different color. Stars are not all icy white. Some are very red and some are blue, and this is easily visible with the naked eye. Maybe this one was a very red one or a very blue one. But back to the point. The star wasn't a jumbotron in the sky, right? It needed to be unusual or distinctive enough so that a learned person who had been told to look for it would notice it, but not so distinctive that Herod's wise men would have seen it, or anyone else on the planet for that matter. Okay, yes, maybe this was an angel shining in the sky, or a comet, or asteroid, or ball lightning, or a satellite placed around the Earth that eventually burned up. Yeah, that's sort of the conventional belief, one of those things. But let's take it at face value and say that when the wise men saw a star, they mean star. The stars that they know well, the stars that they have been watching and searching for years. And anyway, comets and such are noticed and recorded by many ancient civilizations, and we have nothing with the right timing. So anyone with a high school education can tell you that you can't follow a star. Stars appear to rotate around the Earth, right? If you walk towards a star at sunset, then later in the evening, you'll be walking another direction. They swing from east, up, and over to west. If the star is in the east sky at sunset, well, it'll move the most and rise high in the sky where you can't really follow it. So only stars near the North and South Pole, they don't move very quickly, and maybe they can be followed. In the Northern Hemisphere, stars rotating around the North Pole will be relatively high in the sky. Those rotating around the South Pole will be below the horizon, and you can't see them for the most part. So where was the star? Well, this is a lot of fun. I don't think God just threw a new star somewhere in the sky. I think he probably put it somewhere really significant. Now, we don't know what that was, but this is a pretty good guess. The Southern Cross. It's a grouping of 4 very bright stars that circle the South Pole. The brightest one is the 13th brightest in the sky, right out of like 9,000 plus visible stars. And the other 3 stars that make up the cross, they're similar in magnitude. So to recap what I said earlier, today you cannot see the Southern Cross from Israel. But 2,000 years ago, due to Earth's precession, which is where Earth doesn't just spin around an axis, but the axis also wobbles like a spinning top, you could. And I'm going to argue that it's extremely significant in 4 ways. First is shape. The Nephites knew of the cross. They knew that Jesus would be crucified and resurrected. It's also curious that the star, as I said before, came and stood over where the young child was. Stars don't stand over anything. They're points. They move around. But crucifixes can stand erect, upright, as they swing high in the sky. Secondly, direction. As it swung high in the sky and positioned itself vertically, it would have been positioned nearly directly south, slightly west, which leads perfectly from Jerusalem to Bethlehem down an ancient road. Thirdly, function and significance. So just as you're probably familiar with the North Star leading you north, the Southern Cross leads you south. For those in the Southern Hemisphere, a little more complicated to find the exact point above the horizon, but in the Northern Hemisphere it's very easy. Just draw a line. If you can ever see the Southern Cross swinging over the horizon, you would just draw a line down through the long axis of the cross, and that is south. So it would have been well known by people navigating by the stars back in the day. Fourthly, timing. The rising was timed perfectly in the year, such that on April 6th, at about 10 or 11 p.m. or so, it was positioned vertically directly over Jerusalem. Those of you that just want the high-level points, you can go ahead and click through to the 3rd video now. When it comes out, I'll put a link to it on the screen. The rest of the video is just going to be some more explanation, and I'll show star viewers and maps and topo maps and so forth. I'm going to use stellarium-web.org. Before you open this, you're going to have to go to your Mac or Windows settings and set the time zone to be Jerusalem, which is UTC +2. If you don't do that, then you can use the website and you can set your location to Jerusalem and set your time to whatever you want. But the sunrise and sunset time is not going to be correct. Once you've done that, go to stellarium-web.org. Don't go to .com. It's some other website that might try to steal your information. I've also tried Stellvision, In the Sky, and The Sky Live, which are 3 other competitors, but they don't let you rewind time far enough. This one seems to work pretty well. Now I've currently got it set to Jerusalem, and you click on this button and you can set the time. Currently set to April 6th of this year, in the middle of the night. Then you want to go ahead and turn on constellations, turn off the atmosphere so you can see the stars better, turn off the landscape so you can see below the horizon, and turn on the azimuthal grid. And that gives you your horizon back right there. It also gives you this +20 elevation line right there. So for scale, between this horizon line and this +20 line, there are 40 moon diameters can fit in that, right? Because the moon's about ½ a degree in diameter. So that hopefully gives you some scale. If you click on this, there's a slider at the bottom, and the blue background means daytime, the black background means night. So for example, this right here, that point is sunset, and that's the middle of the night, and that's sunrise. Next thing we'll do is we'll search for Crux. That is the scientific name for this particular constellation. There it is. So if we zoom in, you'll see that as we slide around, now we're centered on Crux, that only that topmost star is visible above the horizon, being this line today, right, 2024. And any kind of bush or hill or anything can easily occlude that. All this says is from the top of a very tall mountain, the best you can ever see is 1 star out of the Southern Cross today from Jerusalem. Now let's rewind time. Here we have the same thing, but I've set the year to the year 1. And unfortunately, Stellarium Web does not allow you to rewind further than that. But it actually doesn't matter because for the same date, April 6th here, and time, then within a few years the stars are in the same location. So the year 1 is perfectly fine for this. Let's go ahead and again search for Crux. And there it is. And slide it around. So here is sunset, where Crux is just rising, and right around 10 p.m. at night it is vertically right above south, and then it sets at around let's say midnight. So it's probably at its highest point right there around 10:30 or so. Okay, let's take a little segue. I grew up in New Zealand. I'm going to explain the Southern Cross and its significance, at least in the Southern Hemisphere. Where I grew up, if you don't know any constellations, well, you might know the Southern Cross. It's the most important and well-known constellation. It's on our flag. It's what we use to navigate south. So in the Southern Hemisphere, we don't have a convenient star at the Southern Pole. So what we do is you draw a line through the long axis of the Southern Cross, and you extend it down. Then there's these 2 stars called the pointer stars, and you find the halfway point and you draw another line at 90 degrees to that and connect down. And where these 2 lines connect, that patch of the sky is the Southern Pole. So directly down from that patch will be south on the horizon. Now let's go back to Stellarium and take a look. Around April 6th is when Crux is highest in the horizon at around the middle of the night, right, roughly. So it's only visible certain times of the year. Other times of the year it's well below the horizon, you never see it. It'll only be up during the daytime. Now, when it is visible, as it swings overhead, all you got to do is, if you're an ancient navigator and for some reason can't see the North Star, that would be your primary way to navigate, is you would see Crux and you would draw a line. You'd wait till it's at its highest point and you would draw a line vertically, and that is basically south, slightly west to south. So it's still useful in the Northern Hemisphere for the time when it is visible. So let's take a look at where it is visible on the Earth. Back in the time of Christ, in Jerusalem right here, you could see it. You could even see it a little north of there because, like I showed, on a Stellarium web right here, it's about 10 degrees above the horizon for the center of the cross. So even if you go a little further north, you could still see it depending on whether you've got a hill or a bush in the way. And if we just draw a horizontal line that's parallel with the equator down here, draw a horizontal line all the way along, well, it's visible in all the heartland right there. It's also visible, of course, in Mexico and the southern hemisphere. So there would be no problem with any geographic model of the Nephites seeing this sign and understanding its significance before they set off, or perhaps on the way to the old world. Another thing I haven't explained yet is why the Earth even precesses, right? Why the axis even moves at all. A sphere spinning in empty space, its axis will stay constant forever. And even that same sphere that's orbiting around the sun, its axis will actually stay constant too. But the difference is the Earth is a little bit flattened, right? So the North and South Pole are a bit squished, the equator is a bit bulgy, and the pull of the sun and the moon on this bulgy shape actually tends to try to tip over that axis. So the spinning axis wants to get pulled over because of this bulge shape and the way that the sun and the moon pull on this bulge. And you may have seen in a physics demonstration, whenever you have a gyroscope and you try to tip over its axis, you try to push on that axis of the gyroscope, it'll start precessing around and that create this circular motion and change its direction. So that's exactly what's happening here with the Earth. And that's why we could have seen the Southern Cross from Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, but we cannot really see it today. Last, let's look at direction. So as this is standing over south and slightly west, and it's rising in the sky till it stands over approximately that direction. If we click on a map of Jerusalem here, so this is modern Jerusalem, of course, but here's the Temple Mount. Old Jerusalem, the wall was approximately following this dashed line and coming around here and encompassing the Temple Mount. Herod's palace was around about here, and there was a gate called Jaffa Gate or Joppa Gate right by his palace. There's another one down here, Zion Gate, and there's other gates around the old city. There's another map of it here, the Palace of Herod, and the Temple Mount over here. And you'll see this kind of shape of this wall. If we click back to the other map, you'll see that same shape right there. So we're looking at the correct location. Now the ancient road appears to have gone over, passed over this way and headed down towards Bethlehem. The modern main road actually goes down this way and then crosses over the Valley of Hinnom. So let's take a look at that. The ancient road would have gone down this way and passed on the western side of the Valley of Hinnom. Now let's look at a topo map really fast. This is actually not that helpful because Jerusalem has been demolished and rebuilt on top of so many times through the years that the topography has surely changed. But the general principle of where the valleys are not going to change very much. So here, this is turned on its side, of course. Here is the palace of Herod. Here's the Temple Mount. So let's just say that the wise men were meeting privily or in secret with Herod, right? So they're probably going at night and they're probably having a little feast on grapes and olives or whatever. And then Herod sends them away and they exit out the Jaffa Gate, or perhaps they exited out some other gate, or perhaps they stood on this hill and looked south, which is to the left. But at any rate, once they've exited and they look south, then they would have seen this Southern Cross high above the horizon. And if there was a new star, and if it was associated with the Southern Cross, it would have been right over this old road. Let's take a look at where that road is. If I zoom out, this is Jerusalem. This is Herod's palace. If we zoom out 2 more clicks, there's Bethlehem. So it's south and a little bit west. And this road, this old road, it begins mostly south and ends up a little bit more west. As you walk the 5 or so miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, if you want to get really precise, well, the star is actually swinging that way. It starts out mostly south and it swings a little bit west. Perhaps that's even what it means when they followed the star. I'm not sure, because it doesn't take that long to walk the 5 miles from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, especially if you're in a hurry because you know that Jesus is there. But it's something interesting to think about. Okay, so for fun, let's just look at Street View. Of course, it's changed a lot, but let's take a look anyway. This dashed line down here, you'll recognize that as the ancient wall. Where it says Tower of David, that's approximately where Herod's palace would have been, the Joppa gate is here, the Zion gate is down there, it's labeled. Now, my point in this is to show that there's no big mountain or hill in the way, that you can actually see the Southern Cross in this direction, minus a few trees. So they would have presumably exited one of these two gates, as I said, or maybe stood on Mount Zion, right about where my cursor is. But as they were to have left the city and looked south, they would have seen something like this. There's no big mountain in the way. If they were to have gone around the Valley of Hinnom, they would be coming up here along this ridge, and they've got a clear view of the southern sky. You see here to the left this wall, which didn't exist in its current form, but behind that is a big hill called Mount Zion. So there you have it. I hope you had fun. This was fun to make. I hope you can picture what the wise men might have seen as they exited Jerusalem and looked south a little west, and they saw the Southern Cross risen right above Bethlehem, just where Herod had told them to go, and that all the pieces were fitting into place, and we get to see the Christ child. They would have run from the road. They would have run as fast as they could. And I hope you can feel some of that excitement too. So that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next video. This is Sword of Laban, out.